Hi there. Okay, so this video is about using message queues with Python and specifically ForestMQ, which is a message queue, and you can access it from this Python client called ForestMQ Python. Let's talk about what a message queue is and what can we use it for. So let's get a browser. Um, Now, imagine we have a register form. So let's just create a form here. So we have a button, and we'll just have one field. Let's get a field up. There you go. Have email. This is a register form. So imagine you have an app that you're building, and you want users to register, create an account. So they fill in their email, password, and then they submit this. Submit those details to your server. Now imagine your server is using Django or Flask. So Flask is actually the application layer, and then you normally run it with a production server, something like gunicorn. So why would you want to use a message queue? So let's imagine a scenario, okay? So let's do a simple email, okay? So we've got the email here. The user is using the browser and he wants to submit this to your Flask. Let's do Flask, okay? So he wants to submit this to your Flask server. So this is your Flask app. Now your Flask app is going to receive the register details from the user. Okay, so we're going to send it. It's going to send the details there on the submit, and then let's do it down here. Okay, let's do it here. Let's send those details here. Then it's going to your Flask server. It's going to do some operations, and it's going to store. So let's another arrow. It's going to store the user data in a database. And let's say let's create a database. So imagine this here is your Postgres database. Let's call this Postgres. So it's going to store the information here, right? So now the Flask app stored that. Okay, it's got the register. It's got the registered details and it's storing it in the database. Then what's it going to do then? Then what it wants to do is say send an email. Okay, so let's create another one of these. Let's go over here. And this here is going to send it to Google SMTP server. Yeah, so this is the email server that we're going to send it to. We've got a library to send emails in our Flask app. So this is exactly what we're going to do, right? So we're going to send the email. Okay, going to send the email. So we get the registered user's details, we stick it in the database, and then we send an email to the user. So that's going to arrive in the inbox of this user, whatever their email is. Problem is, we're going to wait for the response. So let's have the response here. So we're going to send here, send email, and then wait for the response. Yeah, from the from Google's SMTP server. The problem is that this could take, an unknown amount of time. So what's happening to this user is that user's just waiting. So you imagine there's a spinning wheel or something, progress bar, whatever. That spinning wheel is just going to keep on spinning because we don't know how long Google's SMTP server is going to take to give us a response. So that's an issue. Okay, so that's bad UX for the user. So there's a better way of doing this, and that's where the message queue comes in. Okay, so let's get rid of these. So we're not going to send directly now to. We're not going to send the email directly. What we're going to do instead is we're going to stick in a message queue here. So let's just call this a message queue. Right. Now this message queue here is let's say it's a first in, first out. Okay, so you imagine, let's send the email. So this is the email here. Okay. Right, now you imagine we've got a couple more. So we send this one here. This one goes at the top. Then the next one comes in. It goes underneath that one, the first one. And then the last one comes in and it comes here. Imagine we have 3 sign-ups all in a row. So that was the first one, that was the second one, and that was the third one. Well, first out means we're going to take that. The one that came in first goes out first. And the one that came in second goes out second. The one that came in last goes out last. Okay. Okay, so that's what first out, first in, first out. It's a FIFO message queue. Okay. So that's how the message queue works. Okay, so you think of it as a pipe. You know, the email goes in the pipe. Well, if another email comes in, it can't go ahead of the one because there's only enough room for one email to fit through the pipe. So that obviously that email has to come out first. Okay, the first one that went in the pipe has to come out first. Okay, so just visualize that if you want to know what a FIFO queue is. And most queues will work in a similar way, and you'd want them to work this way. Okay, so now, okay, so what we're going to do now is, again, so let's go through this again, same steps. The user registers in the browser, submits a request to the Flask app. Flask app stores the details in the Postgres. And now, instead of sending the email straight away, okay, what it's going to do is it's just going to send a message to the queue. And in this case, it's going to send an email. So it's going to send this email here. Okay, so that's what it's going to send. It's going to send that email. So let's do that. Let's send this email here to the queue. There you go. We send it to the queue. And the great thing about this is that the queue is going to respond straight away because there's no downtime. You know, there's no processing. It's just like, okay, we got your request. Here's a response instantly. You know. Okay, so it responds instantly. Okay, and it's just going to send like a 200. Okay, yeah, just over HTTP. Yeah. Right, so we've got this. We send the message, which is, the message can be anything, you know, but in this case, it's going to be just an email string. It's going to be a string. It sends it to the queue there. So now, this is what it looks like now. And we're going to respond here with another 200. Okay, so what happens? What's the flow now? So the user registers, sends its details to the Flask app. Okay, your Flask app then is going to store the data in your Postgres database. Once you've done that, you're going to send a message to the queue, which is just the user's email. Straight away, you're going to get a response. So there's no dead time here. Split second, we're talking milliseconds, no bottlenecks. And then we're going to respond straight away back 200 OK. So this user is going to be instant, you know. So there's no downtime for this user. It's just going to be instant. The preloader will just flash, you know, it's done, and we'll get the 200, and it will just, you know, then it will just forward you onto the dashboard or whatever your app does. Okay. Now, in the background now, so what's the state now? The users, you know, registered and they're happy, you know, using the app. But you want to send obviously this email because you want to send the confirmation email to your user that they've successfully registered to your app. Well, now you've got all the time in the world to do that. There's no hurry because you've got the email, you've got it in the queue, and you can handle that now in your own time. So let's create something to handle that, and we're going to call it an email service. Now notice we're not going to call it, let's call it emailer service. So I'm not calling it emailer server, I'm calling it emailer service, because it's not a server, it's not running over HTTP, it's not running TCP, it's not running any type of server, okay? This is just a Python process. This could be written in any language, yeah, but we're focusing on Python here. So this could be just a while loop in Python, So anything that's just a continuous process. Okay. So we're going to call this email service. Now its job, this email service job, is to just send emails. That's all it does. Okay, so how does it do that? Well, let's see. So the first thing it does is it asks the queue, have you got any messages in your queue? And I've got a message, and it just so happens to be an email. So then and it will say, well, that's great, give me the email. So the email will go respond with the most the message that came in first. Okay, so the oldest message, if you like. Okay, it's not going to respond. Remember FIFO, first in, first out. Now the email service is just a while loop. It can just however you do this, it can now make the request to Google's SMTP server to send an email. It can do that in its own time. It doesn't matter how long this takes or if it blocks, because the main thing is your Flask app isn't blocking your users. So your user might receive the email in a couple of hours' time. It doesn't really matter, but they will get that email. All you're concerned about is not blocking. Now, in your email service, you can use async IO, you can use threads, you can handle more than one email send at a time. This consumer service here only needs to be performant as it needs to be. So for example, you might only have a user sign up once a week. So do you need multi-threaded consumer? Do an MVP, minimum viable product. Just create a really simple while loop just to send one email, synchronously, and it could be blocking, because whatever happens here doesn't affect your Flask app, and it doesn't affect the user experience. Now this thing here, this here might not be an email. It might be a file that you generate, and you might populate this file with lots of data coming from your Postgres. So this email service might be, say, let's call this a file service. Okay, so now we have a file service, and this here is just file data. And what might happen is you might get the message from the queue, and then you might reach out to this database here from this service. So what might happen is you might get the message from the queue, you get the file, that might be file data in the queue. It might just be an ID for every user. Then you go and get the data from Postgres, and then instead of doing this is your file. And you just generate a PDF file or whatever type of file, but you might have to do some calculations. You might have to run some AI or whatever. You might have to chunk some data, and it might take time. So again, you don't want to keep the user waiting. You want to give them a response straight away. So you offset all of this stuff here, this heavy load, to this consumer, and you use this with the message queue. And so this file here, and then the user gets an email, and then you might send an email as well and say, oh, your file's ready, and then the user has a dashboard and they can go and download their file, or they get the file, they get a link to the file in the email. That's for you to decide. So this is a really simple kind of architecture for using message queues. Okay, so let me know if that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave a comment, and I'll reply and try and make more sense, but hopefully that makes some sense there. It's good when you can see things visually. Anyway, so getting back to ForestMQ, this is a queue I've built here in C. I built this in C because there's already other message queues, one built in Erlang called RabbitMQ. Okay, then we've got another queue called Kafka, which is written in Java. So it's just running over HTTP. AMQP actually runs on top of TCP, but it's not HTTP. It's its own protocol. It comes with its own byte headers, and the reason for that is you get a lot more features. You can kind of tell the message queue to build different queues, different branches, and it does lots of things. But anyway, at the moment it just works on top of HTTP. So this queue here is very simple. You basically send it a message and you receive a message. That's it. That's all it does. So the reason why I'm showing you this, if you're new to message queues, it might be fun to just give this a spin because it's just so simple to use. The trouble is with RabbitMQ, if there's so many features. It does so many different things. And you might just want to send an email. Again, it's not production ready. Please don't use it if you're going to push to production. I'm actually using it in production on my production service, but I'm prepared to take the hit. But as of now, working perfectly, does exactly what I need it to do. Anyway, but definitely give it a go, and it's a great learning tool to learn how to use queues in general, and then you can scale up and go to Kafka, and you've got all of these possibilities. Yeah. Anyway, so that's if you're interested, and you just run this as a Docker container, so it's on 6.2 at the moment, 0.6.2. So that's the address here, and you can just run it like that, and it will just run. You don't need a database. So what we're interested in is the actual Python client for this, okay? Because we're Python developers here. Right, and okay, so this is ForestMQ Python. This is a client for talking to ForestMQ. And this is basically this site here. I'll put this in the description. This repo here, this is the only thing you need because it gives you all the details of how to run ForestMQ. You don't need to know the ins and outs of ForestMQ. All you need to know is how this client works. And this client will do all the work for you. And it's very simple. It only has it has three methods basically available to you. That's it. It's that simple. So you have basically a synchronous example. You pass in the domain that the ForestMQ is running on. Call this method here. So this is send message. So this is how you send the message to the queue. So you remember how we sent this email to the message queue? Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. So you basically use the provider API. Now, let's go back to here. There's another concept I want to introduce you to, and that's provider and consumer. Okay, so what's a provider? Well, in this case, the Flask app is a provider because it's providing the email. So you see here this arrow here. We're providing the message to the queue. Okay, and then here you see this arrow here. We're now consuming the message. Okay, so providing, consuming. We can take that concept here. So with this client's API, that's the provider. So you go FMQ, so you instantiate ForestMQ here. Okay, call it FMQ, and then you'll do a dot provider, which is the provider API. And the provider API has two methods. It has send message sync. So this send message is asynchronous. So here you're going to await. And just for this example here, I'm going to run it in an async run method. But obviously you wouldn't need to do that. You just send it like this, and you just with async await in your async handler in Fast API or Tornado, yeah, you wouldn't need to do that. So you could just run this and await this. On the other side, on the consumer side here, say for example we want to receive the email. Okay, so we want to create this whole service here, email service. So literally, this is all you need to run the email service. So this consumer service here that's all the code you need. So this object FMQ, okay, and then we do a dot consumer. We're using the consumer API, and then that has one method called poll. Remember, we're going to keep on asking the queue to see if it's got a message inside, and if it has, it will send us a message. And we can tell it how often to ask, and we do that with this interval. And Also, what we do, we pass a callback. So we can say when we poll and we get a message, call this function. And again, we can send an email here. I hope that's been useful. And I try to make it as not as simple, but just as straightforward as possible. So yeah, check out ForestMQ. Also check out libevent. This is what this is an event framework that written in C that ForestMQ is built on top of. Please, if you're interested in this project, give it a star. Also, the client, please give it a star. I'll put all the details for this and links in the details for this video. And any questions, please leave a comment, subscribe, and good luck, guys, with your Q work. And cheers for now. Bye.